Tamworth.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to speak on the Government's Terrorism and Other Legislation Amendment Bill 2025. From the outset, I want to express my deep sorrow and solidarity with the Australian Jewish community, the Bondi community, and for every Australian who has felt a deep sense of grief over the horrific Bondi terrorist attack. We stand shoulder to shoulder with the Jewish community in the fight against extremism, anti-Semitism and terrorism. No Australian should live in fear due to their beliefs, and we stand united in our condemnation of the hatred that motivated this horrific attack. I attended the Bondi Vigil to pay my respect for the lives lost. It was a service full of sorrow, but it was also a service of strength and solidarity, an example of the best of who we are. Jewish Australians deserve to live in peace, and they deserve to live in peace and harmony in New South Wales without fear of persecution for who they are. Madam Speaker, New South Wales has the strictest gun laws in Australia. And that's why the New South Wales Coalition supports strong action against hate speech, extremist ideology, and the public display of Nazi and terrorist symbols. We've been calling for tougher laws in this space for many months. The New South Wales Coalition offered a bipartisan approach to responding to this horrific attack. Unfortunately, the Labor government has instead chosen to make announcements through the media, decline offers to brief the opposition, and has left members in the dark and the communities in the dark about what these reforms look like. Regional stakeholders have not been consulted. One late phone call yesterday was the only consultation regional stakeholders like New South Wales farmers and country mayors received. The legislation is rushed. It is confused, and so much of it relies on regulation that the Parliament is in the dark about and its proper impacts. I have deep concerns regarding the government's proposed legislative amendments to the Firearms Act. I have deep concerns that these reforms are not properly considered and that they've been drafted without any consideration or consultation in our communities, including farmers, primary producers, business owners, recreational hunters, professional shooters and sporting shooters, the stakeholders who are affected by this legislation. Throughout regional New South Wales, there are thousands of licensed, law-abiding firearm owners whose lives and livelihoods are affected by this legislation. They are everyday Australians, mums and dads, who will be punished because of this terrible action of these terrorists. Through no fault of their own, their lives, their livelihoods and their passions will be taken from them without consultation, without proper consideration and without a democratic process. In the Tamworth electorate, there are more than 8,665 registered firearms owners. Why punish them? Why go after their legal right to own a firearm after someone picked up a firearm and committed an act of atrocity? They were not responsible for the horrors that occurred in Bondi last Sunday. Firearms are the tools of the trade for farmers, primary producers who work hard, hand in hand, to manage land right across New South Wales. My office has received hundreds of emails, calls and visits coming in over the past week to express their view on how this bill and how this process should have been run. Legal firearms owners who have got in touch are horrified that they are being painted in the same light as terrorists by this government, and this government has labelled them as that. They've been deeply concerned about the impact on these reforms. The government's firearm legislation is rushed, it is ill-considered and is not evidence-based. In fact, the Executive Council of the Australian Jury says we don't have a gun problem, we have an anti-Semitism problem. Currently, The Act restricts ownership of certain guns under certain categories only, but does not impose a general cap on the number of firearms a licensee may possess or use. It imposes a general cap on the number of firearms a licensee may possess or use by one individual to 4 across all licence categories except dealer licences, collectors licences, sport target shooters, with the regulation further allowing elite shooters to apply to the Commissioner for additional firearms above the limit, and by primary producers to 10. Mr. Speaker, that clearly highlights a lack of understanding on the subject. Imposing arbitrary caps disregards the diverse need of legitimate owners, such as farmers, contract shooters, pest controllers, target shooters, and recreational hunters, requiring multiple calibers and action types for pest control, accessing across various terrains, weather conditions, or hunters targeting different species. In relation to gun clubs, currently in this bill, there is an exemption for unlicensed persons to possess and use firearms under supervision without a licence or permit while shooting on an approved range or while participating in an approved firearms safety training course, a P650 form, a P650. This clause in the new bill will remove this exemption, and future amendments will be made to the regulation to enable persons to obtain a permit to use and possess a firearm at an approved shooting range. Well, the response from gun clubs, pistol clubs, rifle clubs, and those right across the region, and from the Secretary in Tamworth, Chris Selevic, this amendment will threaten the future of gun clubs, as they will no longer be able to undertake the activities that they engage in which rely on the P650 form. These include come and try days, corporate work functions, etc., and training. These types of events are how gun clubs attract new members and generate income. Gun clubs can't legally pass a person for firearm safety training without actually handling and using a firearm. The abolition of P650 forms will prevent the person from touching a firearm, again directly impacting on the recruitment of new members and initially the training. These changes that are proposed would not have stopped and what happened in Bondi last week. These reforms only punish legal firearms owners. And Madam Speaker, they are not confronting the real issue that this state is facing. We're seeing the lock-up of the Sydney Harbour Bridge. We're seeing the lock-up of the Opera House, protesting out the front of the New South Wales Parliament, and Hyde Park week in, week out, with the city gridlocked by protesters. It is rising crime, it is rising fear and extremism that is being promoted by these protests. The Coalition brought forward some time ago ways to fix that problem, and the Labor government chose to ignore those options put forward by the Coalition. Regional New South Wales should not be held to ransom because of a rushed bill that did not consider, has not considered, and has not consulted with regional New South Wales. I cannot support this bill, and the Labor government has tried to be clever by combining the protest laws and gun laws in one bill. They did this on the hope of wedging people to get them to vote for it. There are areas of the protest laws that the National Party and myself agree with, but the gun laws, there was no consultation, there was no discussion with any of the key stakeholders across New South Wales. They did this as a part of trickery and in relation to their complete ignorance and disregard of regional New South Wales. The National Party has seen right through that, the diversionary tactic, and not addressing this issue head on, which is anti-Semitism and radical extremists. And that's why I cannot support this bill.